Rich also back into the lineup, and he can bomb a ball all the way home. He's got it there. Phenomenal. Rayner, who collects this one, being hunted down from behind. He needs a bounce, a tumble, a roll, a skip. Phenomenal. How's the physics of that? He got away from them, Charlie. Ridiculously good. And he revs them up a little. Keys, this is his moment. He has to nail one. Keys on cue. Sunriser blinds them with science. Zorko, it's a big moment. He zips, he zaps, and Zorko goals. Knocked down to McGluggage. He shrugs, he spins, he kicks, and he nails it. Hands it off. Outside of the boot. Oh my goodness! That's as good as it gets. Front row to the Rochelle show. Siren. It's been a prime time Sunday classic. Finals like atmosphere. Finals like performance by both.
Round 11 in the Brisbane Lions Fancast. The rain came down, the skills went out, and our 7 on the trot is out the window as well. The loss that we were probably due to have as we head into the bye. The Brisbane Lions Fancast are at it again to dissect a very, very frustrating game of footy against the Adelaide Crows. Patrick's back. I don't know, the mood's kind of flat and frustrated at the same time after yesterday's performance.
It's funny that you always say that I'm back as if you're assuming that I'm just going to not be 1 week.
Oh, one day you might send the text saying, you know what, I've had enough of this.
If it's not after yesterday, I guess it'll never come, will it?
I suppose.
It's an odd one. So as we said last week, if we had done well, we probably would have recorded the podcast straight after. But as it is, it's Monday morning now because I couldn't hack it.
Fair enough. It did actually sort of take me... I've got to myself to a point where I can watch a game of footy and if we lose, I can compartmentalize it and sort of get on with it, after half an hour. But that one sat with me for a while last night. Just a lot of what ifs, that sort of stuff. Just,
Yeah. I think it was a big part of if anything went differently, then probably the result is going to be different. So sometimes you look at that level of just weirdness within a game and you have to look at it. I think sometimes and probably we've been guilty early on in the year of just like super micro-analyzing a lot of things and how things had not gone to plan. But I think yesterday it was vastly different to particularly like the Bulldogs game and the Port game. There were issues in the contest. Yeah, there was a few issues here and there, but I think largely the effort was pretty good. And Adelaide are a good team. I don't think they're going to get beaten too many times at home. And that said, I think I even pointed out last week, I don't think that necessarily the Magpies deserved to win. They slimed their way through with that steel side bottom point. But after we recorded last week and did all of our previews and all this, big news was Jack Payne would be out with concussion.
Yeah, that was a very unwelcome surprise, wasn't it?
Oh, it was up there with finding out that Santa Claus isn't real or something. You're like, man, that's not what you want.
The I guess the good news, in inverted commas, that was it did time out nicely with Darcy Gardner sort of ready to come back into the mix, and it certainly wasn't his best game by any stretch of the imagination, but I thought he held his own for a good portion of that game.
A bit of a baptism of fire for a bit of a makeshift tall back three, one that we wouldn't normally have expected. One of which I thought was exploited extraordinarily well at times by Adelaide. So we had Payne going out. We had the Sharp man coming out as well. In came what would it have been 400 games experience, I guess.
Yeah, roughly roundabout. Yeah, 400-ish.
And I kind of feel like Madden's kind of like if you had a Pokemon, Connor McKenna's the evolved one. He's the one underneath it.
the oddish.
The oddish to Connor McKenna's Gloom.
Yeah.
Remember that one from Pokemon Red back in about 1997. God, that was a horrible time. Yeah, so a bit of an odd one. I don't know. I think clearly the Sharp experiment was not seen as having worked, which is odd because I thought he was playing better game on game, but is what it is. As we sort of Muse, no Kyle Oman,
Yeah.
and Gunston held his place. He ended up being ultimately subbed. So make of that what you will. Is it a lost opportunity when you look at a game in the wet? Who knows? But to start it all off, we started pretty brightly.
Yeah, I guess it was a sort of foreboding warning of what was to come. A lot of inside 50s trapping it in, but not making the most of it on the scoreboard. Such was the case for big swings of that match. But yeah, it's sort of how we started against Essendon as well. So sort of getting that ball in quite a lot, but not being able to put goals on the board, which is frustrating in its own right because, we ended up going into quarter time with a lead. Adelaide picked that lead back a bit by the time quarter time rolled around, but it could have been, 2 goals, and it could have been even more if we had have sort of made the most of those opportunities. And at the end, Daniel Rich decided, bugger trying to get a decent target inside 50, I'll just pop one from 60. Proved to be the easiest way to go about it.
Well, it happened back to back in that sense because Rayner decided to shin one a la Rich, a la Ash McGrath in that preliminary final against Sydney in 2003. Just the ball moseyed on over the goal line. And it was, you're thinking, well, we've gotten 2 goals where probably we shouldn't have and not gotten a lot of goals where we probably should have. So maybe it evens itself out. As it turned out over the course of the day, definitely not. But I think so. Having watched quite a lot of Adelaide play throughout the year, I think I said that they were one of my favourite teams to watch. Whatever they did yesterday was not one of my favourite teams to watch because they made it scrappy and they were. They showed a side of themselves that I didn't expect. A bit of lots of grabbing, lots of body, lots of sort of causing a bit of bloody dirtiness. But I think probably one of the only insightful things anyone on that commentary panel said was, when you're a good team, you expect to be hunted. And I don't even know if that was from that game or that was from one of the other of the myriad of upsets over the course of the weekend.
Yeah.
But that definitely held true, I think. So, yeah, we kicked 2, they kicked 3 or something. I don't know. It was fairly even at quarter time, yeah?
I think we're only up by a couple of points in the end. And then second quarter, they played much better footy, especially throughout like the middle 15 minutes of that quarter. And we managed to peg it back in the last, like the Suns did to us last week. We managed to peg it back a little bit, but some of the foot skills, as soon as that rain came, people slipping over all over the shop, bloody people like Daniel Rich, who hasn't missed a target in 10 years of footy, is, shitting it out of bounds or kicking it straight to Isaac Rankin. And then moments later, Starcevic misses Jared Berry by 2 meters and it turns directly into a goal. It was bad watching.
Yeah, it definitely was kind of, we didn't get the memo to play wet weather footy. The idea of just like taking territory, forcing stoppage, being nice and tight and conservative. That was not an approach that we went to until we went for it, which was, in the last 5 minutes of the second quarter. Kind of akin to if you're like a Formula One car and the rain starts falling and you're like, no, Mr. Pit Crew, I'm going to go one more lap on these slick tires. And that one lap takes forever. And then you finally get and put your nice wet tires on and you drive around. And then we did it the other way around, where we stopped. We didn't start playing dry weather footy when the game dried out. We continued to play wet weather footy. So we kind of screwed ourselves twice by leaving the wet tires on when we needed to come in for slicks. So that's my I watch other sports analogy for the week.
Well done.
That sounded a lot better in my head.
Have you seen a worse game from Jared Berry?
I'm trying to think if there's any that got injured really early. But yeah, no, it wasn't great. And he wasn't really alone. Like, I think it was just a general kind of like everyone was sort of a bit down. I thought a lot of like all of the keys. So all of the key defenders and Ben Keys, all of the keys, they played extremely physical in their one-on-ones. So I think they knew, particularly Fogarty is scary. Hey, that way he lined up Starcevic that time, probably the only one that he could have lined up like that and it not have ended up being like a head lopped off in Adelaide Oval. But they were going hard body on Leicester and Darcy, and then further up the field. Man, I don't think I've seen as many holdings, as many jumper pulls, as many this and that, like on a forward line.
Yeah. Oh, Joe especially was copying it from Nick Murray. And well done, Murray. He had a great game. But, geez, there was the opportunity there for the umpire to stamp out some behaviour. And Joe was just getting increasingly more frustrated as the game wore on and would, he'd lose focus on actually playing footy. He would just argue with the umpire and say, "Look, this bloody bloke's holding me. You're going to do something about it," and just kept getting worse and worse, and nothing ever came. And Joe chimed in with a couple of goals late, but it was too little, too late by then.
Yeah, I think when you look at it and you go, well, they've now got an extra umpire that's supposed to be looking for those holding and things like that. It was a pretty not like I don't like to necessarily talk about umpires and stuff like that, but it was a pretty bizarrely umpired game on the whole. It was baffling, and I thought it was probably more baffling than the Gold Coast and Bulldogs game, which was disgusting. I'm so glad that Gold Coast won in spite of that differential and whatever. But yeah, just when you've got situations where you feel like you're being held going inside 50 every time, I can count. There were plenty of goals in in our defensive 50 that were little tugs. Or there was one with Rankin, the Rochelle goal. So when Rankin, he got separation from Starcevich by just grabbing him sort of under the armpit scruff, pulled him to one side, and that gave him the half step to get to the ball and dish to Rochelle. Fair play on the finish. But that's a free kick. But it's a free kick. His arm is pulling jersey. He uses it to get separation. And when you couple that with two marks in the goal square not paid, and Fogarty's got liability to mark the ball out of field by, half a metre, you're wondering what the Adelaide Oval effect has on the umpires. So, yeah, I don't like talking about umpires.
No, neither do I. And at the end of the day, 1-9 in the third quarter is probably all you really need to look at why we lost the game. If you really want to boil it down to stuff, there's, moments here and there that you could pick on, but maybe that was the footy gods correcting themselves after that Joe Danaher mark was paid after the quarter time siren last week. They've given one to Fogarty outside the boundary line, but
we already agreed that the Danaher one was payback for the Junior Rioli one. So when is it going to end?
Well, Adelaide will cop something next week. It doesn't help us this week, I suppose. But
yeah, 3 shots hit the post, plenty of sort of missed opportunities that should have been got. It's kind of like, what the margin ended up being, about 18 points, 19 points.
Yeah, I think the margin flattered us in the end. To be honest, it was 17 points.
Yeah.
By the time it was all said and done.
Well, 2 marks inside the goal square, and if you get one of the 3 posters, and it's not the thing you want to hang your hat on, but it's just you make a note of it and go, okay, interesting. We talked about I talked about Adelaide kicking themselves out of the game against Collingwood, and we certainly did that. There's a moment in the third quarter where we had numerous repeat stoppages, I think to the tune of about maybe McCluggage kicked that goal and we kicked a couple of behinds, and that was our opportunity. The ball goes out to centre wing, and one of their blokes sort of forces a stoppage, and they get a standing ovation from Adelaide Oval because they kind of knew, and I was like, oof, that's a massive win.
Yeah.
That shows a club that's kind of, their fans and the team are kind of really in sync with one another, of them knowing the implications of that moment, which I think was probably the biggest moment in the game, which then led to the goals by Saligo and Rochelle, that one that I'm annoyed about, and probably another one. And that was really what broke the game open, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's nothing more frustrating in footy than working your backside off, trying to get the ball inside 50, putting on heaps of pressure and trying to create a score, missing out 9 times and only for it to go up the other end once, and then they push the margin out a little bit further. Like, we had the opportunity. I don't think we even hit the front during that time. We got within a couple of points, and then Adelaide just pushed the barrier out further and further. Very, very frustrating stuff. Very frustrating stuff. Some ill discipline from the Lions as well. A couple of weeks in a row. Another 666 infringement, which is getting strange. I wonder if that's got to do with Payne being out and people finding their positions. I think that really affected Harris's game, by the way, Payne being out. He was nowhere near his best. Speaking of Harris, that 50-metre with a cheeky little, not going to say gut punch, but a gut tap in the goal square, giving Thilthorpe, a 50-50 shot turns that into a shot from the goal square. That sort of stuff. And the weird one from Zorko, the not eye gouge, sort of the finger across the forehead thing. You reckon he's got anything to worry about there? I'm sure we'll find out later today.
That was the tackle, the high tackle?
Yeah, the high tackle, and then he sort of just went on with it a little bit. It was a strange look.
Well, yeah, so that was an interesting one because he actually, who was he tackling there? It was Pedler.
Yes.
So what happens is Pedler drops the ball and grabs Zorko's arm and holds it high. So Zorko can't get his arm away.
Right.
So that's what happens. And then with his other arm, he's like tapping him on the stomach to sort of be like, well done. You bought a free kick there, which Pedler did pretty well all game. He bought, I think, 4 free kicks, hook, line, and sinker. But yeah, I don't think he's got anything to worry about because I think if you watch, Pedler drops the ball and grabs his arm and locks it in around his head. So I don't think there's anything to ask or be answered there.
I'll have to go back and watch it, but it was a very strange look at the time.
Yeah, it seemed kind of, I don't know, do you remember that tackle that I think Voss laid on someone at some point in history? There were lots of them, where he kind of had them pinned on the ground and he's sort of just talking sweet nothings in his ear. It was a bit reminiscent of that.
Right. Can't say I recall that particular one, but I believe you.
It sort of seemed sort of like, you got me good there, let go of my arm, and I'll pat you on the belly sort of thing. So nothing for me.
If you've got a mate that loves the Lions, tell them to get the podcast into their ear holes.
It was good to see Daniel Rich kick a goal from outside 50. That's a nice little a reminiscent package of years gone by.
Blast from the past. I think it's probably just had to have had one done in every year.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I think at that point in time, it's just like, who needs an inside 50 between him and Rayner at that point in time. Yeah, it was just a bit of an odd one. Like I can't remember if I said earlier on, or if it was before we hit the big R, but similar to Fremantle at Optus Stadium last year, where we kind of just hit a bit of a young buckaroo team at home playing some good football, where sort of they couldn't really do anything wrong. I think I remember Freo having some like pretty tremendous efficiency inside 50 in a similar pattern to yesterday, but it was very similar feeling game, even to the point where it kind of they broke the game and we came back into it a little bit right at the end. But yeah, very reminiscent. Here's hoping that our season doesn't completely derail.
It's I don't know, you can look at it sort of two ways and say we were due for a loss, and we were. There's no way you just go all the way through. I mean, Port aside, who's now won 8 in a row. 7 in a row is a good undertaking, and 8 in a row would have been better, but it's also, over the years, the Lions have been accused of, I guess, 2 things, is failing the big tests, and this was an away game against a top 8 team that we've failed, and also not being able to play outside the Gabba. And that just sort of feeds that narrative that the Lions are no good away from the Gabba, and especially Adelaide Oval, which twice now we've played at and haven't walked away with the Chockies. Having said that, if we play that game again, we win.
Yeah, well, my partner said that game could be played anywhere else on earth and the Lions would win. But I would tend to agree with her. That Adelaide crowd is hot, and Gabba need take note. I know it's a big footy culture down there, but yeah, that was a pretty brutal atmosphere, I got to say.
Certainly was. Well, we go into the bye 8-3, which, as Fag said in his presser, if you had said that at the start of the year, he probably would have taken it. And
I think after round 3, if we said that, I would have like done a blood ritual.
Yes.
To enable that to happen. So yeah, 8-3 sounds pretty good, and I think looking across the competition, Melbourne dropped, Bulldogs dropped, who was another, St Kilda dropped. So we're really only looking, and it was frustrating to have the 2 games before us, with what you would say sort of that direct top echelon, rivals for the top 2 positions. Collingwood weren't going to lose to North Melbourne. It just wasn't going to happen.
It's a bittersweet because it was our chance to put a gap between us and Melbourne and us and the Bulldogs and Geelong, who all dropped games over the weekend. So it's sort of nice that we managed to lose, but they managed to lose, so we still got a bit of a buffer on them, but it would have been nice to put a couple of games in between us and them and really solidify us in a top 2 position.
Yeah, I think like you said before, you can't necessarily win all the time. And I think that Collingwood are sort of, I reckon Collingwood could be in a situation where where kind of Richmond were in, I think, 2018, where they played fantastically well, and then they just kind of like screwed up. And it was like, okay, but you can't play at like this weird peak performance the whole year. You have to have dips. And it's sort of frustratingly enough, like you want to be in a situation where like we didn't play our best footy. Similarly, we didn't play our best. God, we didn't play our best footy against the Bulldogs. We still should have won those games. Like it was still very much in our hands to win those games. So, whether it's that kind of old adage of the ability to win when you're not playing well, I think we've shown that plenty of times. But yeah, it is frustrating to go away from the Gabba and not get the chocolates, as you like to say.
Yeah, it just would have been, as a lot of people said, there's no, it's not the end of the world losing that game, but had we have won it, it would have said a lot about where we're at as a club and, our ability to win away from home and put away a good team. Because while we've won 7 in a row, a lot of those have been against your bottom half of the ladder teams. And we've been winning pretty handsomely, 40 plus most weeks. The biggest scalp in that obviously was Collingwood at the start of that stretch. So it would have been nice to put away a good team away from home. And I thought, when we played Carlton at the time, I thought, that's one of those wins that means quite a bit in hindsight, seeing how Carlton's going, perhaps not. So that game against the Crows would have been a lot better. And I guess we go away for the bye, and our next couple of games are pretty winnable. Hawks at the MCG, Sydney at home, and then Saints away as well. So, time to refresh and get back on.
Yeah, we can't, I guess last week we talked about sort of the quality of opposition sort of throughout competition, aside from the bottom three. And I think Hawthorn have kind of elevated themselves a bit away from North Melbourne and West Coast for sure. But I think this round is indicative of the fact that, basically throughout the competition, a team can beat you on your day.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, I definitely think, and I might have either misspoken or just kind of got my words wrong. But like, I think I said last week that it would say more about the winner rather than the loser of this game. I might have said it would say more about Adelaide. I don't know. But yeah, I just think like it says a lot about Adelaide. It shows that they're kind of like, they're almost there in terms of like a massive threat. But, you look at the 7 games, like we've only played North Melbourne. We haven't played West Coast, and we haven't played Hawthorn yet, which people were talking about virtually being second buys. So that's, when I've said that the whole competition is potentially problematic, Essendon were being talked about as being a finals team until basically we beat them. Fremantle have decided to come to the party. So, you got to bank the wins and away wins against the Giants. We probably had another one that I can't remember.
Carlton and North, I guess, were the other two sort of away games, even though the North game was our home game, technically.
Yeah, true. But I mean, like, I guess with Carlton, it's like as bad as they've been, they're still the kind of team where like you wouldn't necessarily want to play them.
Yeah, they sort of, you can imagine them switching it on at any point. And, if Harry Mackay learns to kick the ball.
That was so funny. Like, it was every time you're like watching a child walk for the first time.
It is strange, isn't it?
It's so weird. Like, one thing I don't get, okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you can stand still and you can kick the ball like end over end. Not a traditional drop punt, but you can just stand still and just wallop the ball about 30 meters quite comfortably. Why do people not do that kicking for goal? Why do they have to go back, run through it, yeah.
Well, he doesn't know what he's doing at the moment. He doesn't know whether he's kicking a drop punt around the corner, bloody barrel, left foot, right foot. He's all over the shop. I feel
Go the barrel.
Yeah, I mean, why not? Good,
at least
good
if
chances.
You go in the barrel, you probably because the thing is that if you put your foot through the ball goes in that direction regardless of how kind of badly you kick it. Like, I don't know, goal kicking. What a bunch of bastards. The idea that anyone within 10 meters or 15 meters of the goal isn't just standing still and kicking the ball off one step, it doesn't make any sense. I don't know. I think I've lost my mind again.
just for a change. I don't know that I've got a huge amount more to say about this game against the Crows. Adelaide were good. Their pressure was right up there. They made the most of their opportunities. All their forwards chimed in. Fogarty, Tex, Thilthorpe, they all hit the scoreboard. Rankin and Rochelle as well. Pedler, Saligo. So, they made the most of their opportunities and they did well. Their midfield was great. Dawson and Laird and Co. and Keys all had great games.
Yeah, Keys is a bit of a... I've got it written, he moves like a dragonfly and that he can move in any direction at the same pace all the time. He just sort of tends to go in and out. And I think it's funny when you're watching, you brought up Jared Berry, like sort of that guy has a bit of difficulty with his agility, and to see sort of, it was almost like the idea of actually kind of running rings around him. But I thought their forward three, Thilthorpe, Thrillhouse, Tex Walker and Fogarty, they weren't kind to a defensive structure that hadn't played a lot together. They were changing between and then forcing. There was one where Froggy was forced sort of up the ground and then they had to swap over, and it was sort of like, okay, they're obviously trying to destabilize the matchups and stuff like that, and allowing one to go. So well coached, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's hard to know how much of a difference Jack Payne made, not only personnel-wise, but structure-wise to all of that as well. Like I said, I think it really affected Harris's game. He only ended up with 2 marks and, a handful of possessions and, well below his best. So if he's right, and he will be, fingers crossed, and it's sort of another Marcus Adams situation. If he's right to go in a couple of weeks' time, who goes out? Froggy or Darcy?
Yeah, we talk about that later, don't we?
Yeah, I suppose so.
We've got to do the votes in the VFL first, don't we?
Get in touch anytime. Shoot us an email at blfancast@gmail.com or join the Discord.
Yeah, okay, all right. Well, votes, 3 to Dawson, 2 to Dunkley, 1 to Ben Keys. Seeing Ben Keys play good footy it makes me happy, and I'm glad he has got another shot elsewhere. It's a shame he played so well against us, but I suppose that's what you do when you come up against your old club.
Yeah, fair. I think for mine, I've got 3 votes to Mitch Hinge, 2 votes to Dunkley, 1 vote to Keys.
Sure. So just the old Lions trio.
I don't know. I didn't pay attention because I don't know who played particularly well, and I don't care. So Dunkley played well for us, and so did Keys. I just stole your Keys vote, and Mitch Hinge was a opportunistic laugh. VFL, what do you reckon?
I did actually manage to catch quite a bit of this game. Got out to an early lead. And then Frankston pegged it back quite a bit, and then it just sort of stayed at that sort of anywhere between 4 and 6 goal margin for the remainder of the game.
We both just kind of checked that to see who wasn't playing, didn't we?
Yeah, I thought it was Archie to begin with because I didn't see him running around, and then someone in the Discord mentioned that he was injured, so it wasn't him. And then, through a process of elimination, we figured out it was going to be Tom Fullerton or James Madden, and not the subs you would have imagined heading into the game, I suppose.
No, it's odd. I didn't really... I can't even recall Madden sort of being on the field, so not to say that he wasn't, but yeah, it's just... bit of an odd one, but yeah, odd VFL without Fullerton kicking 1 million goals.
Well, Kyle Oman was quiet again. It was sort of an even spread for goal kickers. Bruce Reville kicked 3, Sharp kicked 2, Lyons kicked 2, Fort kicked 2, and then just single goal kickers along the way, and Kyle Oman 0 goals 2 in the end, so didn't back up his 7 goal performance from the week before. But Lions again, 33 touches, 2 goals. Jackson Pryor 29, Jimmy Tunstall 28. Dev Robb had a great game, 24 touches and 21 tackles, which is ridiculous numbers. His kicking is still the question mark for Dev, and obviously the discussion around him and his future is going to be constantly raised, whether he is or isn't getting a game in the seniors. Yeah,
it's odd because I remember in his draft year him being kind of compared quite heavily to Rory Sloane, and to see Sloane have a pretty good game in albeit kind of diminished role within the team. We'll see what happens. It's odd because we got, it seemed like they had Adelaide had extra leg speed around the ground. So it's kind of, you look at it and go, well, would JL have been useful? It's maybe with his cleanliness on the ball or in the contest, but
I think the wet weather would have suited JL potentially.
I don't know. I sort of feel like if it's wet weather, I'm running more slowly, and might even feel like a mighty tractor in the field. But yeah, it might have suited him, but also we got pinged on pace wise. I think out of stoppage. So never know. I'm looking forward, I guess.
Yeah, well, looking forward. We've got the bye, and then we come up against Hawthorn. So let's chat about any changes we might make.
Is VFL playing the bye or?
Let's have a quick look here. The VFL's got to buy as well, so no news here.
Okay, so yeah, goodness me, changes, hey? Who wants to shoot first in a duel?
You imagine Payne comes back, and I think, and I hate to say it, but I think Froggy probably goes out. I just reckon that Fags is going to want to give Darcy game time because I think he thinks, and I think most people think that he's probably best 22 moving forward, Darcy Gardner. So I think Froggy is unfortunately the man that gets put out, and maybe he comes back as the sub because he's fairly versatile, I suppose. Other than that, Gunston gets the week off. A lot of people calling for Gunston to be dropped and for Kyle Lohmann to come in. And when you come up against Hawthorn, you can probably afford to experiment a little bit with your team lineup, without completely just going mental and changing 6 over. That's probably the only change. Fags, he's reluctant to make too many changes. So I think Payne in, Frog out, and probably he moves to the sub.
Yeah, I found it odd. Wilmot was playing really good footy across half back, and then to sort of move him back out to the wing and play and bring Rich back in. I thought Rich had a bit of a nightmare. The goal aside, this is the first time where I've looked at him properly in a game and been like, he's not really the player anywhere close to where he was. His hand skills, his getting to the ball, he sort of didn't go in high. It was frustrating. It sort of almost seemed like it was like one game too many or something.
Yeah, and he got pointed out on first crack. We all know Daniel Rich is slow, and if you're an opposition coach, you put one of your quick small forwards on Daniel Rich, and you're guaranteed to at least create a couple of goal opportunities just by pace alone, and that certainly happened.
Yeah, because I think as I've said, that he tends to have better games when we're a bit under the pump, but this time it was kind of, if he had made all of those kicks and if he had moved us into good positions with those kicks, you'd probably be saying that he'd had a really good game. I mean, the general you, not you.
No, and you're probably right. And, there's that one kick that went out of bounds. I don't know, can't remember if it led to a score in the end, but that one that went straight to Rankin kicked it into Tex, that turns into a goal. Later on in the game, he spots Kitty in the middle of the ground from the kick out, and it just falls short. If that kick hits, then he's a hero. But it drops short, turns into another Adelaide goal. So, that's the risk you take.
I think there were 3 that led directly to goals. And then the Coleman to Berry one, it's kind of just like, and that was right at the point of like, okay, put your Wellingtons on and go to work in the wet. I mean, I'd have Rich come out, but everyone knows I really I like Pryor. I'd have Pryor come in on the wing. I don't think it's going to happen, but that's what I would do if I was coaching. I'd have Pryor come in for Rich, move Wilmot back to half back where he's been really good over the last couple of games.
Yeah.
And then, same as you, I'd bring Payne in for Leicester and just give Leicester a bit of a crack on the bench because he's shown that inexplicably he's got the ability to line break and stuff like that now, Froggy, and his field kicking is really good.
He never kicks it more than 17 meters though, but he hits the target.
In the other, not necessarily, yesterday afternoon, but in previous games. I don't think sort of Madden necessarily needs to be sort of near the team. I think that's kind of
that was so strange.
It was a good idea a couple of years ago, and it's just sort of bring other players in. But yeah, I mean Gunston, I think there's value in it. I think he's probably struggling a bit at the moment. Whether that means that I'm sure he's having conversations with Bagan and saying, whether or not he's good to play or whatever.
Yeah.
Losing a parent is an odd feeling. It can do weird things to you at weird times. So we saw that with Dane Beams years ago, where he was sort of having an immense amount of difficulty actually playing footy, and hence he had to relinquish the captaincy. Didn't turn him into a great bloke in the end of it, but whatever. So I don't know. It's an odd one, and I think with the bye, it's kind of makes it even harder to sort of pick because it's almost a bit of a fresh start, and I think we're due for it.
I don't know that there's going to be too many more changes other than Payne, to be perfectly fair, but who knows? As I said, we're coming up against Hawthorn, so Fags might experiment a little bit.
Drop the whole team. Play the VFL team. Yes.
I don't know about that. That you've seen what's happened to West Coast.
Yeah, true. Oh, God, shell themselves.
Make sure you follow us on socials. Just search for BL Fancast.
General sort of footy meanderings, I guess. Is there anything that's tickled your little fancy?
No, not so much. Obviously, there's been some coaching changes with Dimma stepping out, Clarkson having enough for now and are suffering a bit of burnout. Do you reckon, without going too in-depth on this whole situation, and it probably doesn't help that North were getting belted week in, week out, but do you reckon the opportunity is the wrong word, but that this sort of thing could get to Fagan if this thing drags on too much longer and it's taking him away from his duties as a coach and he's pouring all his energy emotionally and physically into this legal stuff, that he might have to take a couple of weeks off here and there? Or do you think the fact that we have been winning weekend aside is making it a little bit easier for him?
Yeah. So I reckon if Clarkson was at the Lions and Fagan was at North Melbourne, I think probably you're looking at the other in reverse. So
Yep.
Fagan taking time off. I thought he looked, when he was on 360, it was probably 6 weeks ago now. That's an interesting interview. He seemed pretty prickly, and then when he was questioned about it, he seemed more prickly.
Yeah.
And obviously that was when a lot of the Mark Robinson, article and a lot of the kind of, let's say like the second wave of a lot of that stuff had kind of come out. Just prior to the statements by himself and by some of the stuff with Clarkson. I don't know if you noticed, but Jared Waitley wasn't letting Mark Robinson talk to him.
Yeah.
There was one bit that slips where you see he's kind of got his like hand up, and when they cut back to them, he like quickly brings it away. So I think that there's not very good relationship between Fagan and Mark Robinson. I don't know that for sure. Allegedly, that's speculation, but yeah, I think it's getting to him, and I think in spite of that, he's having his best coaching year.
Yeah, it's a strange one. I think, generally speaking, and once again, I don't know the first thing about any of this. It seems like there's frustration growing that they're doing the right thing. I say they, Clarkson, Fagan, and Jason Burt, they're all, they're bound by confidentiality and they're not talking about it. People keep talking to them about it and they say, well, we can't talk about it. I can answer, bits and pieces and speak generally and quite vaguely about this whole thing. But then all this stuff is coming out around them, like the Mark Robinson articles in the Herald Sun and different sort of leaks here and there. So people want to talk about it and they're trying to do the right thing and can't. At the same time, they're not getting their chance to talk about it with the people they need to, and that is the investigation panel and the lawyers and anyone in that ilk as well. So it must be frustrating for them that they've got their story to tell but can't.
Yeah, and I thought it was particularly interesting that one of the people from the independent investigation released a statement kind of supporting what Clarkson and Burt and Fagan had said about what they were and weren't allowed to talk about and what information had been being leaked to the Herald Sun. So it was almost like a bit of reinforcement that was not from the kind of alleged guilty parties of saying like, hey, no, like what they're doing is correct. So it's not just they're saying, we've been busted and we're not willing to talk about it. It's an absolute mess, and it's been said that it's been an absolute mess for a long time. And this is the first time that we brought it up because we didn't plan on bringing it up. It just sort of happened kind of organically. So it's a hard topic to talk about because there's a lot of cultural elements that like I personally don't understand.
No, for sure. And we're two bloody middle-class white guys in our 30s sitting here talking about something we don't know the first thing about. I guess it's just a hot topic of the AFL, and it started with me saying, do you reckon Fagan's at risk of burning out as well and needing some time off? So we probably shouldn't go too far into it.
It's almost the elephant in the room, but I can't look at the dressing room that we've got with having such a large First Nation and Indigenous culture within the club. So, you look at what's happened with Mitch Robinson and his wife cultivating that with Charlie Cameron, the Coleman brothers, Cam Ellis-Yeoman, Cal Archie. Like we've always had a pretty large
since
Indigenous community within the club.
Alan Christensen was a big one behind that. And now we've got
sorry.
Anthony Corrie, who's been placed in that sort of leadership role in amongst the club as sort of player welfare, especially when it comes to Indigenous issues and stuff. And he's been in that role before this whole thing came out. It wasn't like, oh no, this report's come out, quick, get Anthony Corrie into sort of paper over the cracks here. So, and
I don't think that Fagan would have the players the way that he has, or the way that he has them. I don't think they'd be accepting if what he had to say to them, and I imagine that there would be a strong enough community within them to be like, hey, tell us what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, tell us the truth from your perspective. I don't think that they would be accepting of anything less than like exemplary behavior.
Yeah, you're probably right. Interesting though, I have sort of, and whether this is just the person that Charlie Cameron is, but over the last couple of weeks, obviously Sir Doug Nicholls round, he's been noticeably missing from any sort of media over the last couple of weeks. Like we did a press conference with Blake Coleman, who I don't think is ever going to play an AFL game, if I'm honest. But Charlie's been sort of noticeably missing from any sort of media, any sort of like poster boy for this whole thing. It's a bit strange.
Yeah, I noticed it was when they were doing a lot of the promotional stuff, it was a lot of teams that were down in Melbourne at the time.
Yeah.
So, like, given we didn't play either of our rounds in Melbourne, it could have been that, and it could have been just a situation of like, well, maybe I don't necessarily want the spotlight on me at that point in time.
Yeah,
I don't
maybe.
know, but I don't know. It's an interesting point, and it could have just been the idea of like Kadeem Coleman and Blake Coleman. Everyone loves brothers, so if they'd wheeled out Charlie Cameron's brother for an interview, then maybe we'd be worried. But yeah, I don't know. But he's still been there, doing the coin toss.
And exchanging the gifts and all that
part of
sort
the
of
lead, part of the leadership group, albeit, but standing, arm to arm with, or side by side with Fagan. So, and I think it's sort of more so the way he's playing, and the sort of defensive pressure numbers, the things that aren't kind of like the flashy parts of the game being so improved and high. That to me is more that you've got him. You've got him with what you're trying to do. So
to touch on that, back to the game briefly, the car crash that was the Adelaide game. I think it might have been first or second quarter. Charlie kicked a goal, and then in the next play, he's down saving a goal in basically full back. And Brownie pointed out, it's like, that's the buy-in that the forward group have had of that defensive pressure and stuff. And probably a lot of that comes down to that coaching swap that we had at the start of the year of Murray Davis now taking care of the forward line, coming from the defensive structures that, he's implemented that sort of side to their game. I wanted a quick shout out as well to Link McCarthy. Didn't trouble the scoreboard, but God, he gave his all game again.
I would also say Hipwood as well in that. Like, Hipwood was, man, he huffed and puffed. I think I just had a note that said Hipwood does not equal stats. So take that, Hoyne. But yeah, it's just, he should have had a mark in the goal square, and he's just relentless. Like, as far as like a forward pressure key forward, like what the hell even is that? But yeah, Link McCarthy, he's a battering ram. We love him. Yeah, sorry, we really went off on a bit of a tangent there regarding the kind of coaching stuff. Hardwick leaving the Tigers, I mean, I think he's getting a very, very kind treatment from the media, given the state that he's leaving that club in. If I was a fan of Richmond, I'd feel quite aggrieved, just because to me, it's sort of not finishing the job that you it seems kind of selfish in that you're willing to go, okay, things are starting to slip now. I thought we'd be 7-4 because I've tried to kind of go, but things haven't worked, so see ya. I think it would have shown a lot more class by him to coach out the year, even if they wanted to put him on a dummy extra year to kind of, I think it was David King talking on SEN about, if they're out of contract at the end of the year, like Ken Hinckley is, there's a lot of media speculation and this and that. It's like, well, just alleviate that by putting him on like a donkey clause to be like, okay, you're coaching next year, but we know you're not, and have him see out the year, allow the fans to thank him for what he did, allow him to retire Cochin and Rewalt and, do those things in the right way rather than, having someone come in, whether it's a caretaker or whether it's, it would have to be someone well established to come in and immediately retire premiership players, a premiership captain. You're looking at a potential issue with a relationship with Dustin Martin, because I know he and Dimma are really close. It's like you're asking someone to come in and make all these changes and then not be maligned by like a pretty kind of toxic-y fan base in Richmond people.
Yeah. They are. They're vitriolic at the best of times.
Well, it just goes to show that, when they're up and about, and I get it, when they're up and about, it's like, we've got 100,000 members, but we don't like going to Marvel, and when with the team's down, we can barely get like I can't understand how he's just being given such a positive kind of run on this of like, thank you, you have done really well. But finish the job and do it correctly. do it the way that's going to, let the fans thank you. Let the players that you've turned from like pretty like good above average footballers into like premiership superstars and like mainstays in the game and potential future Hall of Famers, retire them, show them the right way to do it. It's just, it doesn't sit well with me. That's just my opinion, but
yeah, fair enough. And I'm sure it is shared by others out there as well. I think at the moment people are just sort of concentrating on the fact that, they were irrelevant to an extent for the best part of 40 years, and then suddenly they're a powerhouse 3 premierships later sort of stuff. So I think that's what people are sort of reflecting on in the immediate aftermath, and then maybe, once they reflect on it a little bit more, then people may come to the same conclusions as you. I don't really care either way, bugger Richmond.
No, I don't care, but you just want to, I don't know, it's just, I don't think that Dimma's been quite the statesman that everyone seems to think he is. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah,
he doesn't rub me the right way. He looks like Freddy Krueger, and admittedly I did have a bit of a lurch in my stomach when I was like, oh goodness, imagine if he coached the Lions next year. I would not be on board with that.
I don't see that happening, thankfully. I think there's other clubs that may be ahead in the line for Dimma's services other than us, so I don't think that's going to be something we have to worry about.
Like the show? Make sure to follow and subscribe on your favourite podcast platforms.
So a quick little switch to the old Paddy's Tactical Corner. Interesting. It might have been first crack, might have been this first crack last week. I haven't watched the one from last night. Might have been on the couch talking about corridor use with teams and boundary use.
Yep.
And sort of saying like, a lot of the teams that are up the top of the table are using the boundary more than they're using the corridor, and a lot of the teams down the bottom are using the corridor. Now, this kind of goes hand in hand with what I've said about AFL stats. I feel like they're a couple of years behind where they will be, or where, say, other sports are in terms of their analysis. So I would heavily wager that every team would be wanting to use the corridor as their first priority over using the wide and the wing and the long kick down the line thing. And I think that's purely because if you're a good team and you're playing against a worse team, they're going to flood the corridor and not allow you to move the ball through the corridor. So it's looking at those stats and the wide play against through the corridor. It's looking at them. Well, the reason the good teams can't do it is because they're super dangerous because they're more skilled. So they can't go through the corridor because the worst team are going, well, we'll just put everyone in the corridor and make it impossible for them to go there. So they have to go at the boundary line. And then they generally have better players anyway. So they'll score by going that way. Like, just an odd, baffling thing that's like this analysis of going, okay, we've got all these stats, but they're not actually looking at them within the context of the game. Raw numbers don't make sense without the context. So that's my little stat monkey thing for the week. Don't know what you think about that.
Yeah.
I don't even care.
I guess, or was it that Port was the outlier in that, as one of the top teams that do use the corridor quite often. I think we ranked about number 4 or 5 for boundary use. It's an insurance policy, the boundary. It's a sort of like an extra defender while you've got the ball as well. So you can kick to a contest. If you don't bring it to ground or you don't take the mark, then it's going to go out. You reset and you back your midfield in to get a stoppage and you move the ball forward that way, I guess. And that's, a pretty basic way of looking at it. I guess when we were playing our most exciting footy back in, 2018, 2019, we were heavily corridor use. And, when the ball goes in the corridor, when we do use it, it's fun and exciting to watch. But then we saw what happened on the weekend when Daniel Rich decides to bomb it straight down the middle. It's fraught with danger as well. You turn it over and it leads directly to a goal.
I still put it to you, like, whoever the number one boundary use team is, if they're 5 points behind with a kick out with 30 seconds to go, they're not going boundary side. And that's every indication you need that every team would want to be going in the corridor if it was
in a perfect world,
like the
sure.
percentage play to do. So I think that's that up there with score involvements as a useless stat. And the reason that score involvements is a useless stat, mind you, is because they give one to every person in the chain leading to a score. That's why Nick Dacos has so many, because he gets about 3 per score from these 1 meter handballs. So score involvements can go in the bin. They need to be using goal assists and, like the soccer, use a chance created, which is the pass before the assist.
Yep.
Those are the important ones. Score involvement, the idea that you can have, 10 scoring shots and 60 score involvement stats, baffling, utterly baffling. It doesn't mean anything. So move on with that. I would very much like to do something here.
Go for it.
Last week, I mentioned the idea of Chris Johnson coaching an international rules team in a hypothetical situation.
Yes, I've got this audio lined up.
Of a radio segment from Triple Lucky Charm Radio in Dublin. And we've had
Snowflake Smasher.
We've had someone reach out to us from Ireland with a package.
Well, no, it's not necessarily from Ireland. This is Snowflake Smasher, who has come in and said he does a good...
You're ruining the illusion, you dickhead.
Okay, go on.
No. You do it more normal. No one's going to believe it's actually from Ireland, surely.
So our self-professed number one fan, Snowflake Smasher, heard that, got a giggle out of it, and said, "I'll do your promo in an Irish voice. I can do an Irish accent," and he's done a good job. Let's have a listen.
Coming this month to Croke Park, Dublin, is the International Rules Series, Australia vs Ireland. Coaching the Australians is Chris Flying Fist Johnson, the man responsible for 10 KO of Irishmen the last time he played. To combat this, the Irishman will be coached by none other than Conor McGregor. Get your tickets now, it's going to be a gloves-off bloodbath.
Bloody great stuff.
I was not expecting Conor McGregor to crop up there. The video is like, it kind of reminds me of a bit of like a rudimentary early YouTube video where it's just generic music with just low res pictures filtering over the screen. It's hilarious.
It adds to the charm of the whole thing.
Oh, it's so good. It's like, it's perfect out of like 2008 YouTube land. So yeah, I've watched that probably, I want to say 15 times and just continuously like laughing because it's perfect. So anyone else out there, you got some big shoes to fill.
I mean, I do like the idea of A, the international rules coming back, and B, Chris Johnson taking on Conor McGregor in some sort of, what was it? Irish-fueled bloodbath.
The Australian coat hangers, I think my brother called them. That was 11 out of 10.
Just to rub salt in the wound, Sandy Roberts, the whole night, called me Big Jeff Brown. Jeff, did he? Oh, no.
Have you got a player for us this week?
I certainly do, and this is a bloke we've spoken about over the years. Ryan Hooper.
Ooh, swooping Mr. Hooper.
Yes. 54 games in total, 48 of them for the Lions. He played 6 at Hawthorn. 56 goals in total, 49 for us, so almost good for a goal a game when he played for the Lions, including a bag of 4 against Hawthorn, it looks like, back in the day. I know, he kicked 4 against West Coast and North Melbourne in 2009, so he's had a couple of big games, and then 4 against Melbourne in 2008.
Did he play in the that elimination final against Carlton?
Ooh, let's have a quick look. He was on the list in 2009. He did, and he kicked a goal.
That might be where that commentary line, swooping is Hooper, came from.
Yes, Steve Quartermain, absolutely.
What a legend. Not Quartermain, Hooper. Yeah, we have spoken about him. Bit of a dynamo small forward, hey?
Having a quick look at 2009, he played rounds 10 through 14, and then he either got dropped or was injured and wasn't seen again until the finals. Comes back in an elimination finals after best part of 10 weeks off.
Oh, fair play. Good stuff. Love that. Backing in evidently not the players that got you there, but yeah.
And then got moved on to the Hawks.
Oh, he did, yeah, moved on to the Hawks, eh? Well, that was a bit of a false dawn, but I guess. Yeah, like, I kind of missed a beat not picking an Indigenous player last week, didn't I?
I mean, nah.
Well, if I did, I did. If I didn't, it doesn't matter. Yeah, he's definitely very nostalgic. It's amazing you can have a guy play sort of so few games over, and sort of smatterings over a group of years and be so memorable. So that's kind of exactly what we look for in this sort of segment.
Well, yeah. I mean, in those lean years when you're looking for anything to hang your hat on, Ryan Hooper is right up there.
Yeah, good. What an odd point in time seeing the back end of. He would have played with some great players. Yeah. But maybe not at the peak of their powers.
No, he would have caught the tail end of like Vossi and the Scott brothers and yeah.
Although apparently Simon Black just kept playing forever, so 4th among rising stars in tackles per game.
You'll have to see it.
They have some odd stats. Career highlights: 23 disposals, 9 marks, 3 goals in a 93-point win over Collingwood in 2007 at the MCG. Goodness gracious me, can we please do that this year? Although we're not playing at the MCG, but if we are against Collingwood, it'll likely be in a final. So let's do that, please. Yeah, well, the game was a bit of a mess. This podcast has been less of a mess, which is weird because I almost always say that it's been a mess, and it isn't. So maybe this time it will be.
I mean, we did go on a tangent on something that we probably shouldn't have, but I suppose at some point it was coming. The bye next week, so I don't know. Do we have a bye as well? Give our minds and bodies a rest and have an ice bath, or do we come back with a sort of first 11-week retrospective? This is an on-air meeting.
You're putting me on the spot, aren't you? I think we just see how it goes. Neither option is out of the question. Yeah, Hawthorn dangerous, but hopefully after a couple of good performances, they might be a little bit like, okay, we've settled for 18th, and we'll just crack on.
Yeah, very possibly. Young team. They'll be tired and limping towards the bye, hopefully. So, and we'll be refreshed, hopefully back on the winners list, and we can put this Crows game behind us altogether.
Yeah, well done, Crows, but also you dirty bastards.
But I do want to leave you on one thing, you little beauty.